Computer Art Society is a historic organisation founded over 50 years ago to promote understanding of computer art and what that might mean. That's kind of our background. We've got a whole bevy of talks on our YouTube page. We have a very active Facebook page as well, so keep an eye on all of those, at Twitter and Instagram too, for updates and new talks. Tonight we've got Pita, Arreola-Burns and Elliott talking about post-internet curation. Now, you might wonder what that is. They're going to tell us, so you don't need to worry. You'll be fully aware of what it is after this. They're from Offsite Project. It's an online curatorial platform founded by Pita and Elliott in 2017 via homepage exhibitions, downloadable zip shows, and a residency situated in Google Maps. They support emerging new media artists and address pressing techno-sociological topics. Pita Arreola-Burns is curator of digital art at the V&A Museum in London. Through her role in the museum, she's generated projects to produce new knowledge around historical artworks from digital art collections and links between pioneering and emerging generations of digital artists. So just what the Computer Art Society loves. She's held previously positions with Furtherfield Gallery that many of you will know, and had a career in cultural PR and communications. And Elliott-Burns is a lecturer in digital cultures at Central St Martin's. Recently, he's coordinated an R&D project for the British Council, exploring visions for majority world-orientated UI online collection design, and with IAM has investigated compound disadvantages in the CCI sector, informing the creation of the We Transfer Supporting ACT Foundation. So we're looking forward to hearing more about post-internet curation, and we'll have after the talk, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers, but do put them in the chat as you think of them, or save them up to the end and ask them live, or put them in the chat at the end. So do be thinking of questions as we're going along. Yeah, without further ado, please take it away, Pita and Elliott.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. I'm going to start sharing the screen. Yeah, hi, everyone. This evening, we're going to be talking about the architectonic and curatorial characteristics of online galleries dating from the 2000s, a period that has been delineated as post-internet. So before we begin, we would like to give you a little bit of context about Offsite Project and our position within this period that is conformed by online galleries and curatorial platforms. We founded Offsite Project in January 2017 as an online gallery that has been structurally organized as like a traditional gallery, in the sense that we began building a main exhibition space, and then we have expanded the space into a project room with the downloadable zip exhibitions, and then we have incorporated as well a residency program that takes place in Google Maps. And spilling over also from the screen, we have organized offline exhibitions and maintain a writing and research practice, which focuses mainly on online curation and digital art more generally. We sit ourselves alongside contemporaries such as PAM or Super Modern Art Museum, the Pattern Modern, Rome Biennale, Cosmo Carl, New Scenario, Antiformal, Antimateria, EasySeed, Gallery Web, Local Halls, Scalf, the Internet Moon Gallery, Cluster Dog, AVD, Exhibit On Scroll, Strange, Ring Group Gallery, Digital Artist Residency, Ipuco, Going Away TV, and Emotional Interfaces. Final Hot Dessert, N-1, Spectre World, and Silicon Valley. So as you can see, it's a very expansive community of online spaces and galleries. And this is just a snapshot of the amount of practitioners that are out there and the work that is taking space today. And we obviously have been preceded by a lot of practitioners, especially from the net scene. And if you want to look into a more expansive history, like we will also suggest you to have a look at the book Curating Digital Art, which is here on the top right. That was done by Anna Decker, Maria Laura Guidini, and Gaia Deno, especially like the broken timeline. And tonight we would like to focus like an ongoing research idea that we have had, and we intend to for it not to be definitive, but like it has a long potential in a creative application, and in folding histories and reading them against one another in a more generative manner. In brief, like I'm just gonna like set a little bit of the thinking that we have in this research. Like we believe that post-internet aesthetic flow from online to offline was much like a countercurrent of curatorial properties hybridized online exhibition design, and that this current continues in its totality of three-dimensional metaverse spaces and what it implied for online curation in the 2020s. Together, we will be talking. Sorry, we skipped a little bit.
Sorry, Anna, we were just trying to get Chris to enter there, but can't hit the button. This is going to loop.
Yeah.
Keep going, meanwhile.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, it's animations in loop.
Yeah, but yeah, this is the next slide, but I'm just, yeah. And yeah, as I was saying, like to get you into these ideas, we will be talking to you through some historical models of this place, especially focusing on the summer exhibition and the salon outlined that you're like looking at the moment. We will also giving you a definition and understanding of post-internet art, a term that was coined by Marissa Olson in 2008, and a brief explainer of what Web 1 curation was, a breakdown of 4 Web 2 style curatorial platforms, highlighting certain design properties. And finally, we will comment on how these ideas can lead into Web 3 curation. Yeah, we hope the presentation offers something interesting in terms of insights of the quality of these spaces and what they provide in terms of curatorial spaces and the histories of exhibitions that they are part of.
Okay, so apologies, we skipped forward a second too quickly there whilst trying to admit someone. Building off what Peter's put forward as our sort of premise and idea for today's presentation, I'd like to take a step backwards away from internet curatorial models from contemporary curation, specifically going back 254 years to 1769, and a point in time where, with the permission of King George III, the newly formed Royal Academy hosted its first exhibition in a palace on Pall Mall, featuring 136 artworks. This is what would become known as the Summer Exhibition, rebranded, renamed in 1870 to differentiate itself from what was known as the Winter Loan Exhibition that had been introduced the same year. So the format and formalities that surround the show have remained essentially the same for the last quarter of a millennia. Entry to the exhibition, or entry as an artist to the exhibition, is public, free to enter, and artworks are whittled down by a selection committee. A is the term used for acceptable, D for doubtful, and X for rejected. And the pace that the works are passed in front of the selection committee is rigorous and fast. Then the works are handed over to a hanging committee who, despite the increasingly expansive venues that were used to host the summer exhibition, have to continuously densely pack the walls with a tetric arrangement of paintings which are only differentiated, saved from each other by the ornate framework. The formal composition of these exhibitions is, of course, comparable or something of an import from the Salon de Paris, and also recognizable in the precursor Germanic Wunderkammer. unsurprisingly, amongst the particular characteristics of the summer exhibition is something of a hierarchical interpretation of place and placement. Famously, the hanging committee would begin on the line at the eye level, working from a central point and then sort of emanating outwards. And this resulted in something of a distinction of being placed first in the most prominent position on a given wall, and certain walls having a hierarchical position over other walls, the most predominant spaces. All other works would thus emanate outwards, a sort of cascade of hierarchy that escalated towards the shadowy corners of the lofty elevated rooms. So what's the purpose of raising a comparison between contemporary online curation and a historical form such as the summer exhibition? So if we briefly consider the composition of a wall or the curatorial act of composing a wall at the summer exhibition or the Salon de Paris, we can imagine it from a Cartesian perspective. The work that you hold in utmost esteem is positioned at the coordinate 0, 0, whilst the upper left-hand corner might be denoted as -10, 10, and the lower right-hand as 10, -2, given that there is more space above the eye line than there is below. And so whilst each room is sort of made of 4 walls and can be read against each other, there is in effect a certain isolation to the rooms. They become their own panes or windows to arrange upon. And in that sense, there is a unifying quality between the salon and the contained frame of a laptop screen, or indeed the internet browser that sits inside the laptop screen. There are obviously ample differences. To navigate the salon, you stand in front of the wall and you sidestep left to right, moving your head up and down to take in the full breadth. Whilst to navigate a web page, you position yourself, your body, your head to see a comfortable center line and then scroll along the y-axis, oscillating your eyes left and right. But despite these differences in the sort of bodily mode of navigation, there is and there remains a central pinpoint. Some similar exploration of space is constructed, and it is with that dynamic in mind that we want to explore post-internet curating on the web.
Yeah, the history of the term post-internet at times has been misunderstood, and it has been reinterpreted like many times. It really originates from the artist, the American artist, writer, and curator Marisa Olson, and it can be traced into 2 specific points in 2008. One is an interview that was featured on the website WeMakeMoney.art.com, in which Marisa Olson starts using the phrase. And then the second is the essay, A Lost Not Found, that was published via the LACMA photography department website, workwithoutpictures.org, that now is not really functioning anymore. And that was later what bound into the book that was published in 2009, the circulation of images in digital visual culture, where Marisa Olson avoids in the essay that does for LACMA to use the term post-internet, but she goes and describes a community of pro-surface art practices that emerged in the 2000s around internet surf clubs websites, including Nasty Next, that Marisa Olson was a co-founder of. And what typified the surfers or these communities that were very engaged into navigating the web was an escalated mode of media sampling, paired with extensive exploration into emerging web subcultures and the glitch artifacts of networking living. And this is something that we can see through the Nastiness webs and the content that they have put together. So there's little aesthetic continuity in the work of the pro surfers. Instead, we can see how they appropriate, reuse, and rearrange some of the content, like really reflecting on the dynamics and the emphasizing into new ways in which images are circulated in the internet, especially in the late 2000s. And you can really retrace them into very similar practices that the art movements like the Dada had when they were, instead of using analog tools like the glue, like they are really replacing that with the right-click save and the internet cable in terms of how they use remix culture. And like around 3 years, the term was debated and defined by multiple commentators. And Marisa Olson kind of came back to the term and provide more definition around it in 2011 when she wrote the essay Post-Internet Art After the Internet for the 29th issue of the Piano Photography for the Phone magazine. And instead of defining an aesthetic, she explained how the post-internet can be understood in comparison to post-modernity, where it doesn't really mean the end of modernity, but after a point where there's more critical awareness of the social context. And she has this quote, by sheer virtue of making things, the critical self-aware internet users makes post-internet art. So an important distinction between the internet artist and the post-internet artist is that the prior principally exists and operates online in the space of the browser, whilst the post-internet artist really goes between the on and offline worlds to create the work and to source material, making gallery-directed art that reflects on the internet social systems and the circulation of the media. The very emergence of post-internet art signal to us a level of merging into the everyday, the indispensability of internet that makes a subject of reflective inquiry. So really when the computer becomes and the technology becomes more settled into everyday life is when post-internet really takes a momentum.
So with this moment of post-internet, we can kind of examine and understand this flow of internet structures, systems, and ways of thinking back into physical, away from keyboard environments. But to return to the curatorial, we would like to propose that at a similar time or a short period after Olson's definition of post-internet, a contrary flow was happening as well. This would be an inflow of in real life curatorial logics that began to influence the next generation of online galleries, or possibly what might be termed as kind of the first kind of quasi-professionalized period of internet gallery culture. To make sense of this, we have to step back and look a little bit at the shape of curatorial practice pre-Web 2 in the sort of Web 1 era. And from that, we can kind of understand what was changing, how and why in different periods of online curation. So roughly and broadly speaking, in the 1990s, net art and internet art practices were found in two types of online venue, either as self-contained URLs, self-contained websites that would make the piece both an artwork and a sort of performative exhibition of itself, or they were located and bound together through hub and spoke curatorial platforms. So here, for instance, on the left, we see ArdaWeb, and on the right, Gallery 9, which was from Walker Art Center. So founded by the entrepreneur John Broverwick and the curator Benjamin Veal, ArdaWeb served as a digital foundry that commissioned artists to work with web designers. Artists invited to work with the ArdaWeb platform included kind of established art world names such as Jenny Holzer and Lawrence Wiener. And in total, the program created over 24 projects, all that were accessible in a sort of network platform, but slightly differentiated from each other. Gallery 9 was set up by the Walker Art Centre and the curator Steve Dietz, who incidentally, around the same time, had archived AdaWeb, due in part to Yahoo acquiring its parent company and shutting down the website. So following a similar commissioning model, Dietz and Gallery 9 assembled an interactive database of artworks, writings, projects, and exhibitions that could be called up from the coloured squares featured along the site's southern edge. So the home page, the arrangement that you just saw there, the individual squares would activate certain projects or texts inside the browser. Binding these two projects, as well as other similar initiatives such as C@C, the computer-aided curating initiative, which was produced for the KW Institute, as well as Tate's NetArt program that ran from 2000 to 2011, is a sort of sense of cumulative aggregation of materials and artworks. So these aren't necessarily exhibitions with a clear start or end point, but they expand with hyperlinks in a systemic way. And it has users moving and navigating from a uniform start point backwards and forwards into different words and back to the hub space or between works. The curatorial arrangement of these platforms is effectively a reflection of how the internet was constructed at the time. It was less centralized and required more exploratory approaches.
More broadly speaking, Web2 curating is affected by a different internet ecology with increased access to website platforms and a predominance of densely populated social medias like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Telegram, like we have like some of them here in the screen, but sometimes referred to as what you see is what you get. Content management systems such as Wix, WordPress, Squarespace, and Cargo Collective allowed artists and curators to create quickly personal websites or experiment with the browser as an artistic venue. Our platform, for example, Offsite Project, is hosted via Cargo Collective, running on a version 1 of the software that allows more manual customizations than the updated version 2. And this has permitted a gradual expansion of our coding skills in line with our curatorial creativity. But it's also good to mention that some of those customization settings that these platforms used to have has been like closing as they have updated the version. So we have maintained that version 1 where we start like coding with Offsite Project. And paired with the websites, every online gallery operates across one of more social media platforms, predominantly Instagram, Discord, or Telegram. It can be even argued that promotional channels become the primary site. The gallery itself has become a secondary space, or they function within like different ecologies or communities. And then under these conditions, we see a more mainstream gallery approach adopted, with platform curators scheduling solo and group exhibitions with defined opening dates and events and points. Shows increasingly run back to back with a short install and install windows plan, mirroring the behaviors of more traditional galleries that need to sell artworks to pay rent. However, it is more likely like these self-imposed demands are due in parts thanks to the visibility gains of social media and the narrowing opportunity for artists to show in artist-led spaces, that this was caused mainly by the rising rents in the cities. We in turn see online galleries representing analog work alongside born digital media and exploring how this shapes curation. We will now look at like specifically 4 platforms and a sample of shows they have produced in the last years. So we have the first example is EasyC, that was founded in 2016 by the artist Bob Bicknell Knight during the early days of online and offline galleries. that were like, EasySeed is like very characterized by having a very like frenetic weekly curatorial output. Like the shows typically feature a small assembly of artists. Their works are arranged by Bob Bignell Knight on a single subpage of the website with the exhibition text included alongside them. Displayed here are two early shows from 2016. Like once the shows come back, you will see them. But
Space back of that.
yeah, we have here Welcome to the Internet on the, and then Virtual Shadows, like both documented in their restored forms after the updates that platform Wix have done with the website. And notably, these early exhibitions are often retained within the scope of a single fixed window without a downward Y trajectory or indeed the more unconventional X-axis. Like these shows evoke the curatorial considerations of a single gallery wall. Works could be manipulated to any size, yet the arrangement have certain formal qualities or characteristic to them. They're often like, first one could be that they are often orientated alongside a central horizontal line. They are divided from one another as per the hard definitions of a pictorial frame in the salon that we were seeing early, with the occasional overlaps taking place, and captions appear alongside them to inform the viewer the attribute of the work, so like the maker. To a certain extent, the curatorial act here involves pure positioning of emphasis relations and to aid a conceptual objective rather than aesthetic. And quickly, however, a greater level of customization and intermixing of the website architecture has been based on curatorial thinking and comes to typify really the exhibitions that EasySeed had done through the years. With the guest curated group shows from 2017, such as Where's Your Code by the collective Shy-Burn, made more explicit use PNG background colors, audio files, and the gesture of a scroller is also included there. Like notably across the curatorial work of Big Bernay, we can see, and his collaborators, there was a constant intermingling of born digital media with more analog pieces, a tendency that recognized how even non-digital artists were finding relevance in showing the work in online platforms and through these communities. And constantly evolving, it's understood of online exhibition design and the capabilities of the Wix platform, the complexities and sophistication of EasySeed's exhibitions developed towards shows such as Please Don't Stand in the Middle of the Road, Waiting for Me to Get Your Camera in 2019, as well as Office Space and Piper in the Woods from 2020. So as an example, we're pulling up why don't we get a Kickstarter going for an ISP that opened at the end of 2017. Centered on an elongated Facebook post by the artist Ian Ball and session comments, it inspired the exhibition cops, the user interface implications, and invites the visitor to scroll downward. So we're seeing these gestures from social media coming into the online gallery space. And forking off Ball's conversations, a series of Ethernet cables just left, right, at the head of and foot of comment change up and down. These representations of connectivity link the conversations to works by other artists that are brought together in this group show. The overall design replicates the sensation of reading a textual feed punctuated by attention-grabbing images and videos. Why don't we get a Kickstarter going for an ISP effectively combines together certain characteristics of navigating the internet in a Web 2 era, with most of reading art along a curatorial history. The horizon line of the salon and summer exhibition moves from being a fixed height along a wall to being a comfortable resting eye line for a human to sit in front of a computer, combined with the Y-axis on the line moves from the prestigious position to a matter of descent. Or all works eventually pass through this intersection, and so we might ascribe prominence to being placed in the upper most point of the page, the political implications of the wall are generally neutralized under this curatorial logic. So it is what Elliott was mentioning about these different coordinates that really like take different shape when you have this scrolling, and then when users are moving, mimicking social media dynamics.
So the second example we're going to look at is the Arbeit plugin program. And if we would understand, is this it, and the sort of curatorial experimentation that went on in that platform as using the Y and sometimes X axis or X orientations to expand the curatorial pane, then the Arbeit plugin program represents the sharing of curatorial responsibilities within an absolute confine. So functionally a browser extension for Chrome or Firefox, the plugin program triggers a curated schedule of pop-ups that are released or launched on the computer at a specific time throughout the day. Each artist being represented by a set of specifically scaled and localized windows that unexpectedly announce themselves, interrupting a typical working day sat in front of a screen. The curatorial wall is thereby quite literally defined by the resolution of the screen: 1366 by 768, 1920 by 1080, 2560 by 1440. These pixel dimensions are the curatorial zone. Now, whilst the original curatorial act rests with the curator to choreograph the ordering and arrangement of each artist's pop-up moment, a second act of curation is passed on to the plugin user, the person who's installed it on their browser. As the pop-up windows intersect with the different software programs already active, a scramble to rearrange takes place. Do you instinctively minimize or close the windows? Do you try to click past them and to bring to the foreground a document you were previously working on? Or do you take pause and play with the signaled curatorial properties of the polarized glass surface, the screen? Initially conceived during COVID-19 lockdowns, the Arbeit plugin program was developed for Arbeit by Rob Prowse of the design studio 10 PM. The original show, Real Time Constraints, was guest curated by Elliott and featured works by Gretchen Andrew, Sophia Crespo, Disnovation, Jake Elwes, Ben Grosser, Libby Heaney, and Joel Simon. In the accompanying essay to the show, Arbeit curator Rebecca Edwards provided an accompanying digest of the history of the pop-up, noting that what ultimately made the pop-up so repellent is that it created a break in immersion. And she would go on to apply this by saying, a property that can now be employed as a new stopping cue tool, one to create blockages, disruptions, and jarring breaks from the seamlessness of consumerism as we experience it today. Effectively, Edwards was aligning Arbeit's plugin as a repurposed technology that was used against commercialism. Since its inception, the Arbeit plugin program has commissioned further shows with guest curators, including 10 exhibitions that were launched in line with the Wrong Biennale, and the software is now on its version 3.1.8. The latest exhibition shown here is called Minimal Rituals and is by the antimateria curator Doreen Rios. It's scheduled to populate desktops at 12 noon daily and cycles through a daily rotation of 8 artists. Shown here is the final day of the loop with works by Paraguayan artist Kira Zonarica. Compared with some of the more spacious compositions of real-time constraints, Rios's arrangement, or at least in this case, the arrangement of Zonarica's work, is a maximalist interference, necessitating engagement either to clean up or to rearrange. In this way, the curation is not an optional activity, but a requirement, reminding our everyday scaling and ordering of subscreens as a compositional act, and drawing us back to a bygone age where the desktop was not so sanctified. The third example we'd like to look at is a mass gift gathering organized again in response to COVID-19 lockdowns, a project called Well Now, What the Fuck, that was curated by the artist Faith Holland and Lorna Mills, with Wade Wollaston, a digital art curator, anthropologist, and the founder of the Silicon Valley Media Arts Channel. With an excess of over 100 artists, Well Now WTF was organized into 12 thematically styled rooms, and thereby inherits the abundant qualities and organization of the summer exhibition or salon, hence the comparison of the map here. Amongst the featured artists in the show were internationally recognized names and newer talent. So you had people such as Carla Gannis, Casey Rias, Claudia Hart, Jan Robert Leggett, Jeremy Bailey, Laturbo Abaddon, Petra Courtwright, and Ryan Tecartin, operating as the Turner or Constable equivalents of their digital age. There is also an overwhelming quantity to the show, each GIF straining the eyes, and the totality of them becoming almost impossible to take in as an entire project. However, within the rooms themselves, there is a certain diffusion of the hierarchical standards and priorities that were common to the salon and are still common to the summer exhibition. With titles like So Sad Because the Art Fairs Were Cancelled and Bed of Nails, each room is organized with a selected work enlarged on the left, as you can see here in these three examples, and a thumbnail selection arranged to the right. So again, you can see the outlines appearing here of the different thumbnails, the 9, 10, 11 works in each room that could be selected from. And though one work may predominate as the default image, and there is a suggestion of a sort of curation of the sequencing through the left and right arrows that can be used, the central line, the on-the-line comparison is somewhat nullified by the feverish clicking and exploration and the curation of your own route that the person, the visitor takes themselves on. To a degree, the viewer begins to operate in the fashion of the selection committee. They can watch repeated loops of acceptable artworks that catch their attention. They can sample briefly those deemed doubtful, or they can skip over the X rejected works without even clicking on them to see them. The pace of consumption, too, is somewhat comparable with the incessant flow of work seen by those judges. To a certain extent, it is a show about capturing and conveying the volume and diversity of digital artistic practices, a summer exhibition sampling the energetic aesthetic sensibilities of its time, and one that is partially curated by the user.
For the last example, we have this gallery that is one of the most concentrated examples of the curatorial wall, like really being cross-pollinated with the potential of digital media. It's customized version of the Common Garden platform. This gallery was founded by Constant Dullard, who is an internet media artist and is co-curated with Nina Layson. And the platform usually invites curators from all over the world, like from Bogota to Delhi, Hong Kong, Nairobi, and Shiraz, to curate the program. And the gallery maintains usually a schedule of 2 to 3 shows that are released in different seasonal periods. And this results in an association of innovations where the platform can be used and really shows like a different curatorial result that like all of these different people are like really pushing the boundaries of what they can do with the medium and with the tools that have been programmed in the platform. They also have an ongoing R&D process of like new applications being added to the system, thought it is two core functions that make this gallery like very unique. Foremost, the curatorial arena expands along both X and Y axis of navigation mat, which are pinned on the upper left corner. So you can see here, like next to the logo, that we have a map, so we can really see the location of the works and how we can navigate the space. And it actually means more like a means of navigation that really takes us off of the media wall and then into like more spatial considerations. And the second is that the cursor change once you're in the platform. So instead of having the usual cursor, when you get online, and you can see it here, like it's a little circle, that your cursor becomes almost like an Easter egg. And when you encounter like another visitor that is coming like really close, in close proximity to you, your camera will turn on, so you will see your face reflected in the egg, and then you will see the other person's face as they are passing the space. And you can also localize them, like it's very small, but you have a red point on the top left corner, and you will have all of the points of the different visitors that are in the space, so you can also see what type of works they're seeing, and you can come to them and encounter a conversation. So it really brings this back, this idea of the salon and what it meant to, like, exhibitions were also gathering a space. And the original impetus of Common Garden was to create a new and original online meeting space for curatorial institutions through the melding of an invitation-based approach of programming that is global in its reach, and a literal system for happen chance meetings. This gallery really attains, so I would say, like, bringing all of these qualities to turn the space in a very like social curatorial place to inhabit and also to visit.
So from these four examples of what we would call curatorial projects that have been born out of a sort of Web 2 approach, or out of a real sort of awareness of the internet browser and the facilities of that, as well as a relationship to social media platforms, we want to briefly turn our attention to the metaverse or Web3 types of curatorial project, things that are being sort of foregrounded as a potential future for how online curation might be developed. And in particular, we want to put forward one final idea, one final thesis point that can be explored or thought about, and that is that the 3D, the Web3 spaces represent what we might call an nth degree of skeuomorphic design, with skeuomorphic meaning the use of ornamentation for familiarity. So think, for example, the desktop icon bin being a sort of shorthand for what process the computer is doing when you trash or recycle material. We can kind of understand an extension of how the implementation of analog ways of thinking and socializing in Web 2 are now being carried forward in Web 3 with exact renditions of physical spaces. So on this slide, we pulled together 3 examples of projects that were born in around 2020, sorry, and 2021, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, when there was a demand for existent galleries to replicate themselves, to create facsimiles online. Galleries like Koenig from Berlin, Hauser and Wirth with their Minorca complex, and even Nicoletti Contemporary, a gallery based in East London, pushed forward to accurately scale their galleries into digital renditions to create versions that had the same physical properties. Of the 3, Nicoletti stands as being the most experimental, thanks to a policy of reskinning the walls to align with the artist's aesthetics. So here we see a show in the bottom right by Chris Dorland, which has a sort of red and black gridding to kind of differentiate itself and to make the space unique. Koenig's gallery version of their Berlin space, based on the Brutalist church that they're based within, is accurately recreated in the Decentraland metaverse program, with only a few small additions to differentiate it from the physical locale, principally a hole in the wall and a large coiling purple snake-like object that allows users to climb out of the gallery and carefully walk up into the air. It is notoriously difficult to reach to the top. Most faithful in its rendition is the Hauser and Wirth project. At the time, in 2020, Hauser and Wirth are planning to open a new complex on an island in Mallorca. You can see it in the sort of image located roughly centrally. And rather than or facing the postponement of the launch of the space, they flew in a team to 3D scan the space in exacting detail, and then worked to 3D scan Louise Bourgeois spiders to populate it, to make an exhibition in the space that would be akin to an exhibition that would take place there. To varying degrees, these projects represent a slight lack of imagination in what the internet's potential is and what the potential of these technologies are. But fortunately, that isn't always the case. Other projects created around this time have, to a much fuller extent, recognized the potential of environmental curating and have spotted more interesting ways of incorporating other Web3 technologies into this sort of gamified system. Off to the right-hand side, we have New Art City, which is a platform established by Don Hansen with Benny Lichter and Sami Vila. And this platform gives artists a creative toolset, or curators a creative toolset, with which they can build exhibitions. They can work with a number of preset structural objects and skin those, or they can upload objects into the system and position them. This has resulted in some amazingly creative and a massively variable level of exhibition design, and has also been tied up with different organizations representing different groups, utilizing the platform to create really exciting exhibitions. So the one that you see at the top is by the Asian American International Film Festival. To the left, at the top left, is Epoch Gallery, which specializes in creating sort of semi-fantastical environments, real-world locations that are fused with a surreal edge, that house group exhibitions. And these exhibitions are collectively sold as singular NFT editions. So you may have 10 artists participating in a show, but the show itself is the thing that is sold to collectors. And the proceeds are then split between the gallery and the artists. And at the bottom of the page is Occupy White Walls, which is possibly one of the most successful examples of the blending of gameplay mechanics with museum or gallery curatorial practice. In the right-hand image, you see a sort of wooden sketch mannequin that is the default character in which you inhabit this world, and users select from a toolkit of preset walls, floors, furnitures, as well as a content management system of artworks to build their gallery or museum. So the metaverse gallery here incorporates kind of factors brought over from games like Fortnite and The Sims, whilst blending that with a fairly kind of systematic museum-style content management system. So in comparison to the prior slide and those versions of online curation, which adhere to faithful renditions of real-world spaces, these projects represent a looser and more imaginative interpretation of where Web3 curating may go.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's all from us. Like, thank you for tuning in, and we hope you like the presentation. You can also see more of the writing and the research that we have on Offsite project. Like we have a publishing part of the platform as well. And we maybe should stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. I think we have got a couple of questions in the chat. Having a look. Just close a bit. Whilst we're setting that up, I had a little question. Whilst you're answering that, I'll find the other questions. What role could the Computer Arts Society, for instance, play in supporting the preservation of this kind of work and highlighting the pioneers of it? Because that's kind of our ethos. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I there's an interesting thing about preservation with a lot of these spaces. Naturally, quite a lot of the projects, they can be short-lived. If you look at the timeline in Annette Decker's book, some of the projects might have had a time span of, say, 3 years, and compared to a brick and mortar gallery, that's can often be the expected life of a gallery. That often means that the service, the payments to servers or the payments to platforms expire, and these projects are lost. Or in our case, we took a choice with Offsite Project very early on because we were working with the CSS code of the platform and editing it. So old exhibitions would start to fall apart just because we had to rearrange some of the platform's code to put on a new exhibition. So preservation is quite tricky, and there's not great standards. There are platforms like Rhizome, and I'm trying to remember what their sort of preservation tool that they set up, which have offered some solutions. They had that sort of web recording.
Yeah, yeah, they have, sorry.
That might
They
be
have done more emulation with the platforms, because also when you have like network environments, you need to not only sustain the platforms but also the content that is uploaded into the platforms. Like, for example, like videos, if you're like bringing content from YouTube, like you need to make sure that the plugins are still working within the platform, because it was what we were mentioning the things with, is this it, like the platform updates the software, but then you need to make sure that it is compatible with the YouTube version that we're uploading there, or YouTube will update the version, and then you won't realize, and you will see just like a missing link, or like people visiting the show will come to see the show and a lot of links will be missing, so the content will be there.
I've just seen that Chris and Andy speaking in the chat. It was web recorder Rhizome's thing, and it's now Conifer, which is the commercial project they're saying. The other thing in terms of like CAS is I would say get involved in some of these spaces. So in particular, I think there would be great opportunity with something like Occupy White Walls. The platform is really quite intuitive. So they use one system called Curation, where you can upload a collection. So you need to work on Occupy White Walls, upload a collection of artworks that you have some ownership to, and that gives you access to the platform to then build a museum or a gallery space. I think it's finding those opportunities to kind of start playing with like what these curatorial spaces might afford the Computer Arts Society as online venues to reach a different audience, and through reaching that audience, kind of finding out what the conversations are. I've spoken with the owner and the manager of Occupy White Walls, and he knows that his public are coming from a gaming perspective, and they are very much, that's their foreground, and they are passionate about art. But finding ways to sort of synergize and kind of have those conversations between, people from CAS who really understand the history of computer art and can share that knowledge, and using those metaverse spaces as a mid-ground for those conversations might be really profitable.
That's really interesting. And we'll hopefully look into some of that in their next meetings and stuff. So we've got a few comments in the chat and questions. Does anyone want to ask a question live? Because we're happy to have live questions too. If you do, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. If you'd like to ask a question live, I think one person. Yep. Hi, you're muted.
Hi.
Yep, they're not now. Thanks.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Wu. Thank you so much for such a great presentation. It was really lovely to hear from you guys. It's actually kind of interesting. The New Art City, one of the exhibitions in my dreams these days, I helped co-curate that exhibition, and I've been actively participating in a lot of New Art City exhibitions. And a question that I had that I run into with my work is, I feel like Web3 and creating your own virtual 3D spaces creates a lot of opportunities for artists to redefine how their work is shown. And that's something that I personally really enjoy, and done projects where we really try to we try to world build and create narratives that kind of honor and create like a beautiful space for the artworks to kind of coexist together. And so with this trend and with these newer opportunities of Web3 and creating 3D spaces and curating these spaces becoming more game-like, do you have any concerns or thoughts on how maybe the lines between a game and a curated exhibition might blur together?
I think one concern that carries for a while in metaverse style virtual reality spaces, which isn't necessarily inherent to games, but is maybe part of gaming culture with sort of subscription models and games that require you to kind of work with in-game currencies and payment systems, is that these spaces have a tendency to become quite commercialized. So, buying land in Decentraland is really expensive. I think it's something like the last estimates I've read of like a plot of land in that metaverse is from 2022, but it was about $6,000. So they are highly commercialized spaces, and historically they've been that. Second Life had a commercial aspect to it. Active Worlds in 1997 had a commercial aspect to it, but those have really kind of like become very exaggerated from where they originated from. And I think that threatens the level of creativity that's potential in those locales, because it imbues underlying logic that if you're going to create something in one of these platforms, you better be making a profit. And if you're not making a profit, you might as well move on, or your land will be bought by someone else. And that actually takes us back to something that wasn't really working in Web 1 that led to the .com boom and bust. So I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I think also the problem is that you're relying too much on graphics to have the experience. And then not everyone, or not like all of the countries have that internet bandwidth. So you will have a very different experience from someone that has a very like rapid internet speed. And that really is something that needs to be considered also in terms of how the image is being downloaded, the sound, the artworks per se. And that also happens a lot in terms of the physical works that are exhibited in different countries that have like these problems. But definitely, I think also for accessibility in terms of like artists, I think New Art City is a good example of how you can share software and then you can share the platform with other people. But there's a pressure, I will say, also for artists to have access to these tools, to have the equipment, to generate like very strong visual experiences for their audiences. And it puts a toll in an already like like a world that is already like competitive and has its own complexities without the technology.
Great, thank you so much.
We had a question in the chat from Rebecca from Arbite, who
you.
said that
Well, sorry.
she's been reading about Cade Deem's theory of parareal as a way to describe an alternative to the metaverse. With Web3 curation you showed, do you think that replicating or renditioning is a step back in terms of progressing this space? And in fact, we should be looking towards Cade and others talking about a hybrid, ephemeral and transformative space rather than the fetishization of spaces that already exist.
Yes. So yes, yeah, very much. I don't know that theorist writing on the subject, but I think if you look at like the early sort of like trailers that Meta were having for what they were imagining, the sort of notorious Puerto Rico orb trailers, they really wanted a facsimile of the world, and they kind of in later things led to a more sort of blended, hybridized reality, but it's still one that's very kind of fixed to, you know, AAA game budget. Let's make it look very, very real, and that seemed to be the default option of museums and galleries in 2020.
Yeah, I think also there's a very nice piece by Mindy Seo called "The Metaverse is a Contested Territory," where she's specifically addressing Zuckerberg's idea of the metaverse and how, like, when you are building these spaces that can be anything or can be like spaces where the constraints of the physical world doesn't matter because of the hierarchy or the type of behavior that you want to enable with the people inside it, like you tend to replicate a lot of the architecture of the spaces. And specifically she was speaking about how the meta employers are like really encouraged to interact or to work from home in these meta spaces, metaverse spaces, sorry, but they will be hanging in an office. Like so it doesn't really bring like, yeah, they don't allow people to go freer into like a forest or like different experience that will bring like different ways of like thinking or behavior. So behavior is like really controlled, and I think that happened as well with the galleries because they most of them show certain financial status through the work that are constructed. And obviously in the case of Hauser and Word, with the example that we were showing with Menorca, is one of their 8 venues, like there is like a way for them also to display the world through the architecture of the metaverse space, and also to kind of influence that in a way in the users, because they want like collectors to come into these spaces that resonates with their idea of luxury or like luxury art
In terms of
shopping.
sales venue.
Yeah, but it like really the aesthetics just enable like behaviors in people, and they're like very present on these people that are building metaverse spaces that look a lot like physical spaces.
There's also a big question about what sort of subjectivity you enter that space into. So, you know, a lot of these spaces you inhabit something akin to a human, something bipedal. You know, whilst the trailer might show that you can be a robot or a human or a sort of we me type thing, there's very little moving beyond a sort of subject position that is kind of just a copy of a humanoid. And that kind of seems to be a missing opportunity as well with the renditions that we're seeing, that you can't shift your subjectivity. You know, immersion and immersive technologies have this real potential to think in more than human ways that doesn't necessarily seem to be recognized in metaverses currently, which is a shame. I mean, it could be a real potential to move beyond a human-centric kind of habitation. But that's maybe not the sort of world that people want to play in, that might not meld.
Takes me back to Second Life and all the weird things that went on there.
All the weird things, but all the weird things that were kind of humanoid at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, no one ever played as an avocado. They played as, you know, an
You could be
avocado
a furry
skin.
though.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there were some other questions. So Christina said, do you feel like there's a drop in interest for digital first work post internet? Digital first work, sorry. I don't know, a comma, post internet. Does that make sense? Shall I ask it?
Post-COVID.
Post COVID, yeah.
I think. Okay.
Yeah, that went first.
Okay. I think if
But
you look at,
primarily digital, I guess they mean, like, rather
yeah,
than being artworks that are, you know, photographs of artworks or scans of artworks in a 3D
yeah. I think
metaverse gallery.
if you looked at art fairs like Frieze over the last couple of years, I think there was something happened around the alignment of some sort of instability in cryptocurrencies in summer 2022 that meant that a lot of galleries in October 2022 and again in October 2023 weren't showing digital works, whereas several years prior and even pre-COVID, there had actually been more digital display at art fairs like Frieze. That's a very anecdotal kind of reflection. I don't know if you've seen or thought about it in other ways.
Yeah, I think it really, like, there was a drop in the interesting and like seeing like things digitally per se, but like I think people always like before the pandemic they were already like very used to hybrid formats where like you will come to a gallery and then see something on your phone, and that's the way that we interact with the world. And the fact that everything got isolated all of a sudden into the screen really like cause an anxiety where like people really want to be outside again. But I think at the same time, it really highlight the relevance of the digital in everyday life and brought the digital to a lot of like people that weren't familiarized even with platforms like Zoom that were more corporatized before, like people start like engaging a little bit more or thinking about the international or the potential of these technologies for wider collaboration. And I think definitely there has been more interesting in looking back into histories and trying to, in terms of digital art, like there's has been more interesting in understanding where these practices come from, or like just in general, people are like really keen in understanding what's the digital, how it's defined, who's creating artworks. But yeah, like there's at the same time like a little bit of like tiredness in the meaning.
I think that the caveat is that you do see new organizations springing up and the strengthening of existing organizations. Verseworks running an event over the weekend and having a very good position of kind of working between digital works manifested as in physical space, as well as selling digital editions and showing that those commercial models can be hybridized successfully. So I think there's promise after a bit of fatigue.
Thank you. Just a comment in the chat. Dumo said, really like the GIFs in these slides. It elegantly echoes the theme of the speech. So it was all worth the effort of making all that. It looked like a lot of work.
Thank you.
And there's another question from Kema. Chema, do you see the potential in this kind of projects to create a kind of parallel network of art production, distribution, etc., that bypasses the formal art market dominated one?
I think there's a potential, but like when you look into these different phases of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, what is really important and what it makes them what they are is the communities around them. So how people are organizing around the technologies. So I think the potential is in how those communities will start using the technology to create different things. For example, also in our case, we start offsite project because we want to organize exhibitions. We want to work with artists that we met, like through our work. So I think there's always like this potential of like creating new things. But I I don't think, well, at least that's my personal opinion. I don't think it's the technology that afford that. It's more how the communities think about the technology and organize themselves around that.
And possibly to a certain extent, like how the communities buttress between each other. So there are distinct phases of these digital art practices, and we can trace that back to the 1960s computational art and how that evolved into the 70s and 80s, and then net art, which is kind of different, and then post-internet art. I think there's a lot to say about trying to strengthen the intergenerational connections between those different genres and moments and recognize some continuities, especially as you look at a lot of like NFT orientated practice, and it seems to be sort of returning to conversations, procedural, systemic conversations that were present in the 1960s. Yet we are not always really that this history isn't always really coherently understood. You know, when we started out curating, we definitely didn't understand the wide picture of digital art practice. It's been a very slow learning curve. So I think, you know, to build on Peter's point, to build that community, to bypass, as you put in your question, these more formal, centralized art worlds, I think it's about sustainable communities and passing the baton a little bit.
And we've got a comment from Andy, who first of all, he says that Second Life's still there. We still talk about it on our podcast. So, but I tried to log in and I couldn't remember my password. So my lovely avatar with its beautiful clothes that I spent a lot of money on at the time is lost forever, I fear. And Andy said that's a fascinating comment on the line and continuity between the eras of digital arts. Thank you for sparking thoughts on that. Can you recommend any sources for learning more about that history? I would have thought Rhizome was a good resource for that.
Yes, yeah, and they also have the website, because they publish a lot of like historical works and also about like emerging artists. And they have the Net Art Anthology, but also there's the Internet Art book by Rachel Green. There's the Annette Decker book that we mentioned at the beginning, Digital Art Curation. There's also Mindy Siu's Cyber Feminist book that also has an online version, so you can see a lot of the content of the book online.
You could also look, if it's more sort of curatorial, Beryl Graham and Sarah Cook have done a lot of like the really excellent writing around the subject. And look, even like web page resources, tons of it. Yeah, the Crumb List, NetTime. I think what's interesting about it all is that there's a lot of efforts to try to bring it all together, but it's always too big to bring it all together. And so there's different people accounting for different parts of the histories, and then you have to start overlapping them, stacking your books together.
Fantastic. I think that's all the questions that were in the chat. I don't know if anybody's got any last minute one they want to ask or anything. Give it a second. But otherwise, I'm going to say that's actually a really good point to end, is having all those resources. They're loving the suggestions. People are loving the talk. Congratulations, says Natalia. So fantastic. Yeah, lots of lovely comments in the chat. So we'll